In March 2026, fertilizer prices surged 26% in 1 month. Most shoppers never noticed. By the time 8 foods enter the red zone at your store, the damage is already months old. It traces back to one straight. On March 4th, 2026, commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz came to an abrupt standstill. Fertilizer carriers, including the massive Khalij-e-Fars and Al-Mansur, dropped anchor in the Persian Gulf, unable to proceed. Over the next 8 days, roughly 15 to 20% of the world's nitrogen, phosphate, and potash shipments were trapped at sea, as insurance cancellations and naval warnings froze traffic. By March 7th, some vessels attempted a costly detour around the Cape of Good Hope, a route that adds nearly 3 weeks to the journey and increases freight costs by $180 to $250 per ton, even as a handful of oil tankers resumed passage on March 9th under military escort. Fertilizer cargoes remained blocked. The closure ended on March 12th, but the damage was done. The global supply chain had been forced into a high-risk, high-cost reroute, exposing just how fragile the world's food system is to a single maritime choke point. The cost of fertilizer did not just climb, it leapt. In March 2026, the World Bank's Pink Sheet recorded a 26.2% jump in the global fertilizer price index. For American growers, this spike landed at the worst possible moment. The surge collided with the narrow window when farmers must make final planting decisions, especially for nitrogen-hungry crops like corn. Within days, contracts for urea and ammonia reflected the new reality. Input costs had soared and the math behind spring planting shifted. Some growers faced price offers that were hundreds of dollars higher per ton than the month before. The timing could not have been worse. By mid-March, the planting calendar demanded action, but the financial pressure forced many to rethink how much nitrogen they could afford to apply, or whether to plant corn at all. A supply shock on the other side of the world had just rewritten the economics of the American farm. Nitrogen fertilizer stocks across the Midwest sat at just 3/4 of normal as the planting window opened in March 2026. For many growers, this wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It meant hard choices with real consequences. Sarah Whitaker, a fifth-generation farmer near Urbana, Illinois, watched the price of urea climb to nearly $700 per ton. With only 75% of the usual supply available and prices up 26% in a single month, the risk of applying less nitrogen or planting late became impossible to ignore. Agronomic research shows even a 10 to 15% cut in nitrogen can shrink corn yields by 8 to 12%, especially if application is delayed by several weeks. Sarah calculated the odds and decided to switch 40% of her acreage from corn to soybeans, a crop that demands far less nitrogen. For her, the decision carried more than financial weight. It meant breaking with family tradition to keep the farm afloat in a year when every input counted. A smaller corn harvest does not just affect the farm, it causes a ripple through the entire supply chain. Feedlots and ethanol plants compete for every available bushel. By June 2026, the USDA's feed grain index is projected to climb 7% year over year, reflecting a wave of higher input costs for livestock producers. Cattle, hog, and poultry operations all rely on corn to keep animals growing, so a tighter supply means higher feed bills across the board. At the same time, biofuel plants that turn corn into ethanol face shrinking margins. The cost of corn rises, but ethanol prices do not keep up, squeezing profits and forcing some facilities to scale back production. When corn becomes scarce, its value as animal feed and as a fuel source both rise, creating a bidding war that drives prices higher for meat, milk, eggs, and even gasoline blends. This industrial domino effect is already showing up in commodity markets, setting the stage for broader food inflation in the months ahead. Beef stands at the front line of the protein price surge. In March 2026, the average retail price for beef climbed more than 12% compared to the previous year, the sharpest increase since 2014. Ranchers like Miguel Herrera near Lubbock, Texas, faced a double blow. Feed costs shot up as corn became scarce, and a new quarantine halted imports of feeder cattle from Mexico, cutting off 1.2 million head that usually helps stabilize the market. Herrera testified before Congress that he was forced to cull 8% of his herd in 1 month just to stay afloat. and now plans to reduce breeding rates further. Across the country, the national cattle herd has fallen by 5% since 2019. As beef supplies tighten, shoppers will feel the pinch first at the meat counter, but the effects won't stop there. Major poultry and pork producers are already cutting breeder flocks by 5 to 7%, setting up the next wave of protein price hikes in 2027. Coffee prices are now up 20% year over year, with instant coffee jumping even higher, 25% since January. In Brazil, cooperatives like Cooperativa Fictícia have faced fertilizer shortfalls of more than 20%, forcing farmers to cut nitrogen and accept lower yields. The impact doesn't stop there. Sugar and sweets are climbing too, with the USDA projecting a 6.7% rise in 2026. More sugarcane is being sent to ethanol refineries as oil prices stay high, tightening supplies for food producers. Wheat has not been spared. International prices rose 4.3% in March, pushing up the cost of flour and packaged bread. Rice yields in Asia are down over 2%, a drop tied directly to reduced nitrogen use. Even processed corn products, including breakfast cereals, snacks, and sodas, are climbing 3 to 4%, squeezed by higher costs for both corn and sweeteners. Across the grocery aisle, the ripple effect is clear. A fertilizer shock in March has quietly set off a chain reaction, touching everything from the morning cup of coffee to the price of a simple loaf of bread. What begins as a 26% fertilizer spike becomes tomorrow's grocery shock. With food inflation lagging 6 to 12 months behind, today's supply chain tremors are tomorrow's checkout realities. Stay alert.